Carbon Neutral's been around since 2001. It was formed on Man of the Trees back then they saw the then emerging carbon market as a way of planting more trees in rural Western Australia. In 2007 it became a registered environmental charity, and in 2013 we privatised, formed a for-profit arm, but retained the charitable arm as well. So effectively what we do is help businesses and households and people measure, reduce and offset their carbon emissions. So we work with hundreds of businesses and thousands of people. And the current ownership is a man called Dennis Watson. He's the principal shareholder. He's putting a lot of money into our projects, and his vision is to leave a legacy for future generations. So the land that he's purchasing, that we're revegetating, will one day be left to the community. As you know, we have a below 2 degree target in terms of climate change, and current policies, most experts would say that current policies by the Australian government won't achieve that, or it'd be very expensive to do it, to continue with the ERF under the current program. So a price on carbon, a cap and trade system is almost inevitable, and to me that will be a good thing. It'll help fund what we and other organisations like us do. I commend this to you. The CSIRO launched, this is the results of a 2-year study, about 40 researchers. It hasn't got a lot of airplay, but the modelling that they've done supports everything we are doing, I'm pleased to say. Effectively they're saying that large-scale carbon habitat farming across Australia will have a significant improvement in terms of biodiversity, reducing our emissions, but also creating new revenue streams for rural Australia. So go online. It's quite a big report, and it takes quite a bit of reading to get your head around all the modelling they've done, but it's a very important piece of work, I believe. So our work is now in the Midwest. So we've created what we call the Yarra Yarra Biodiversity Corridor. It's a 200-kilometre corridor. Those yellow marks on the map are the properties we've purchased. We have purchased more, and we've got our foot on quite a few as well, because next year we're planning an 8,000 hectare program, tree planting program. But working together with other farmers, we hope over time to connect up the 12 nature reserves and the remnant vegetation in that region. One of our directors, Ken Broad, is also a director of NAC, so we obviously work very closely with them. And we have not gone with the ERF or the carbon farming program. We have, for a number of reasons, gone with an international standard in terms of measuring and certifying our carbon. That's the gold standard. That's a premium international standard. Reasons are the many changes that the Australian government has imposed on us in terms of measuring carbon. The regular changes over the years, many humps to get over. So we went with Gold Standard, who used world best practice allometrics. Gold Standard also recognises the non-carbon benefits, the environmental, the social, economic co-benefits that these projects deliver. Under that standard, we have to monitor and measure them. And so we have, in 2015, 7,000 hectares of our 11,000 odd hectare program was certified under Gold Standard. 1.25 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalents over a 50-year crediting period. But of that, 20% goes to a buffer, so our saleable credits are about 1 million, just over 1 million. And all the land we plant will have a 100-year carbon right and carbon covenant. That's typical of a country we've put our foot on, or purchasing, or planted on. It's over 90% of the Perenjori-Morawa shires have been cleared for farming. Most people agree a lot of it should never have been cleared for farming. It's unproductive, it's uneconomic. A lot of it's suffering from herbicide resistance. It's just poor cropping country, pretty weak, not that good for growth, under the current heavy cropping program is not that good for grazing either. All of our program is direct seeded, two rows a metre apart and then 10 metres between interrow. But the eucalypts, we plant about 50 species, but the eucalypts are a bit of a challenge, so they are planted with seedlings, so the York gum. We use about 300 to 400 stems per hectare of the York gum. That's where most of the carbon is, but of course we've deliberately chosen a biodiversity planting model to try and replicate what was there originally. So a lot of the trees we plant have very low carbon, the shrubs and the smaller, the acacias. Not much carbon, but they're an important part of our biodiversity. There's a before and after, I guess. So on the right is the, you can see the 10 metre row spacings. That's Kent Broad, year 3, so 3 years after planting. So most of those were planted by seed, apart from the York gums. So that's within 3 years in a pretty dry environment. The good news for us is less winter rainfall, but now with climate change we're getting more summer rainfall, which is great for trees. Biodiversity is really important. It helps a lot of our clients. They can purchase carbon credits from anywhere, from wind farms in China or India, much cheaper than our program. But it's the biodiversity impact we're having that really appeals to most of our clients. And with this year we'll be funding a PhD student looking at the malleefowl. We have done a biodiversity baseline survey and identified 250 species of insects, 50 species of birds and about 150 flora species. So it's quite a diverse environment. Sandalwood's part of our mix. It's excluded from the carbon measure, but about 5% of our, roughly 5% of our plantings is sandalwood and Australian native sandalwood. And so over time we're building up quite a big resource as an extra revenue source, because the current carbon prices, carbon alone is really, from terms of long-term viability, very tricky. So we're looking at other revenue streams. We've also, our chairman said we've got all this, now our planting is 11,000 hectares, wattles are flowering, so why don't we look at bees? So we've created a bee enterprise, and that's an Indigenous enterprise, so Clayton Lewis is running that, currently about 250 hives, but hope to get to 1,000 in the next few years. And as I said, that's an Indigenous enterprise. And we have also, as part of that, planted this year about 130 leptospermum species under irrigation for Manuka honey, which the value is 10 times that of native honey. We've always used sheep after year 3 as a means of reducing our weed burden, fire risk, but now with nearly 12,000 hectares with 75% effectively is inter-row. So we are now ramping up our sheep grazing enterprise. We'll be looking at developing the pasture in between the rows, and that's become an important part of our revenue stream. And we also from day one have mapped and protected the heritage sites. So having people like Clayton Lewis on board has been really beneficial for us to understand the importance of that. It's not all about carbon. There's so many other aspects to what we do that appeals to buyers of the carbon credits. Some come to us, big companies in the East Coast come to us and say, we want to offset, we want to buy carbon credits. When they hear our story, some of them have actually said, actually we won't buy your carbon credits, we'll fund you to plant trees. So for every invoice they issue, we plant a tree. And some of those companies are issuing thousands of invoices a month. So we effectively they are paying us to plant thousands of trees per month. And as I mentioned, biodiversity is the real winner. So some of the other carbon farming companies have gone with monoculture, oil mallee. That's certainly a much higher level of carbon per hectare and cheaper to plant and much cheaper to monitor, but we've stuck with biodiverse plantings. The gold standard is very much about sustainable development, and I'm sure you're aware of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Well, there's 4 or 5 of those boxes we tick, but more and more of the big companies are looking at working within that framework, so it resonates with them what we're doing. So it's their CSR, their corporate social responsibility programs, have now switched into more of a sustainability program, and it's been built into their corporate planning, not just a little side activity. So more and more companies are adopting this sustainable development goal framework. Who buys carbon offsets? We've got about 300 clients. This is just a snapshot of some of them. It's a very diverse mix. Probably the sector that's missing is mining at this stage. We are talking to a few mining companies, but local government, very big in WA particularly, but also in the East Coast. We're on the panel for the City of Melbourne, City of Sydney, councils in Melbourne and New South Wales, and quite a few in WA. University. It's a very diverse mix of companies who are looking to purchase offsets as part of their environment management program. And why buy offsets? These companies realise that if we are to achieve our emission reduction target post-Paris, that Australia's current target isn't enough. As radical as that graph looks, Labor's target is 45% on 2000 by 2030 compared to 26 to 28, the current coalition policy. So I'm pretty confident that target will be ramped up if it's to match the under 2 degree target. So companies are seeing that the government really is not doing enough. There's no consistent policy. There's no bipartisanship. So companies are saying, right, we'll step up and make sure that their footprint is at least carbon neutral. Why buy offsets? It's part of their environmental management strategy. Public recognition is part of their branding now. Competitive edge. We're getting companies who now are selling a product that's carbon neutral, fish, wine. Supply chain pressure. More and more companies are dealing with their customers are saying, what are you doing in terms of reducing your emissions and offsetting? So there's many reasons. Staff engagement. There's many reasons why companies are doing this. These are some of the companies that we work with that are working under the government's EPCOS branding program. So again, a whole diverse range of companies. And I'm quite confident that as this sector's growing, companies like us will be establishing in other states. It needs to be done large scale to achieve the economies of scale, but we are, I also should mention, we are exporting carbon credits because of the gold standard being an international standard. We've exported them to the UK and to USA, and I'm hoping that will ramp up considerably. So big opportunity for everyone. There's plenty of room for more players. Thank you.